Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 203. And before we get started, a quick reminder to follow Identity Office Hours on LinkedIn or YouTube. Our topic today is We Solved Identity, Then We Hired Agents. And our guest today, as many of you can see, is Steve Tout. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on your show.
So for those of our audience who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. I got started in identity in the early 2000s, working at big telco. I spent the next 15 years working in large enterprises in the bowels of enterprise identity and access management. The second sort of chapter in my career, I ejected out of the IT industry and started working in startups. I went back to get an MBA. I started a couple podcasts, and that leads me to now, which is I'm on my second startup and working on verified intelligence, building AI solutions. And the AuthR protocol is one of the ones that I've been working on lately. So that's where I'm at today.
Awesome, and that's why you have the cool microphone already.
That's right.
So, the topic today is we solved identity, then we hired agents, and the homework for the episode was really focused on this idea that you have called AuthR. Let me maybe start with a sort of a general question. Why do you think that agents break our traditional mental model for IAM?
Yeah, I think agents as a hobby, you just work with one or two of them, and you have a fairly well-known boundary that is easy to protect and to monitor. Not as problematic as when you start to incorporate agents into multi-domain workflows or sub-agents or agent swarms to do things more at scale. And those types of scaled deployments tend to break the model because they are non-deterministic, and they end up doing things that the original author or developer never intended. And so you see problems like the on behalf of with reuse of OAuth, for example, tends to break down, and you need a different paradigm and different types of guardrails to keep those agent swarms and adversarial agents in check. And that's where I think it starts to break down. And part of the challenge that I see is some places in our industry are trying to reuse existing protocols and treating agents as though they were humans. And I didn't want to be on board with that. So I just put some thoughts on paper with, I was calling it AuthR too, because authorship representation, and someone on my team was saying, called the author. And I'm like, I love it because that's actually the first word in the protocol's name. And to reimagine what it would be like to treat tracking intent of agents separately from scope, which is how we manage human permissions today.
So before we kind of go deeper into the idea, I was reading the homework, and one of your articles was talking about a guy, an enterprise architect, I guess, or CISO or something, leaving RSA Security Conference and asking questions about the difference between agents and digital twins. And I'm curious if you have some thoughts on that. What's the difference between an agent and a digital twin?
Yeah, well, let me take you into the context, and I won't name names to protect the innocent, because that was what I described coming out of the RSA conference. You're hearing a lot about in RSA in 2026. You're hearing a lot about AI and AI agents in these terms thrown around. And the natural question from this cybersecurity leader was, well, Steve, you're talking a lot about digital twins, and we hear a lot about agents. And then so there were actually three levels of AI that were pulled into the question, which is you have agents, you have sub-agents, and then you have agent swarms. And digital twin is a special kind of agent, which I could get into, but the taxonomy there was like a single agent, single task. and subagent, subtask, and then agent swarm is like, in number of tasks. And I described it that way. And then I created a 2x2 matrix. I ended up giving a talk about this, where you have, agents that are aligned with your corporate policy, but then you have adversarial or feral agents. And that becomes more problematic when you have feral agent swarms that can be used in attacking organizations, etc. So I use that 3 level of agent of AI taxonomy, Mike, to describe the from basic, in terms of complexity, from basic, moderate to high.
Still not sure I know what a digital twin is, though. That's the one I was actually interested in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could add just to that, on the digital twin, that it represents a special kind of agent in that it is a a replica of, if you will, of the actual knowledge or expertise of a human. A hybrid twin could be, it represents the knowledge or the expertise of a project or some other artifact. Like there's a corporate digital twin. Imagine that, right? So there's digital twins of humans, digital twins of a project or a program, and you have corporate digital twins as well.
Yeah, I've heard, I going back, I want to say, let me look back in my episodes. I did an episode maybe in the first, like 2 years ago, about digital twins with the CTO of WSO2, Asanka. And I remember thinking about the term then, and I was wondering how it had evolved since then. But I guess we digress a little bit. So let's dive into it. The idea of an author. So in identity, as you mentioned, identity is, we say, well, it says who is the subject, right? And authentic. I actually looked at the word derivation. Authentication comes from the word authentic, which is from the Greek authentikos, meaning genuine or original. Author has a completely different word derivation. It comes from the Latin auctor, means originator, creator, or founder. And authorization and author actually have the same root word. Authorization also is coming from auctor, from the creator or the originator. So these words they're actually they're cognate with each other, especially author and authorization. So identity comes from a completely different, and authentication comes from this other completely different word, Greek word. I'm just wondering, why is author actually a unique construct here? I have to admit, I don't actually see it. So I guess I need convincing that author is adding something new into this equation.
Well, when I look at the threat model, Mike, the problem that we have today is not that, it used to be said like 2 years ago or 3 years ago at Identiverse and other conferences that identity is the new perimeter. And, that comes from, before then we used to say, the firewall was the perimeter, right? And so security solutions came about to protect the perimeters, right? The firewalls, the networks, the humans, right? Their attributes and their data.
Mm-hmm.
And the threat model that we're working with now is that it's no longer the identity of the human or his or her information or a network or a firewall that we're trying to protect. So the docs on GitHub have a threat model, and what I'm really looking at, and what we're looking at in AI right now, is the cognitive layer is the threat vector, where you're able to compromise humans based upon their knowledge. You can simulate humans, their voice, for example. and make something that's completely sounds like another person by the way they speak, and do text to voice translation, and it's it's no longer about if a user or an agent has access or who they are anymore. It's about parsing. The intent is one of the primitives of this spec, and it's not binary, right? It's fairly nuanced in terms of what agents are trying to do. So author is really about authorship, and that means when we're trying to track the lineage and provenance of uh, what agents are doing with any given interaction, that we want to know a couple of things about what that agent is doing. That is, what human being authorized this agent? What are the economic ties for this agent? And therefore, what is or isn't it authorized to do based upon those conditions? So it's really about authorship, the work product at the cognitive layer, and less about the binary: is this user authorized or authenticated or not?
Yeah, it sounds to me like so you said that identity used to be the perimeter. Um, in past identiverses, certainly in the last SailPoint Navigate, I think I went to, that was actually the theme. In full disclosure, I wrote a book called Securing the Perimeter. And I had reservations about that title back in 2019, but I was convinced otherwise. Um, so there was this idea that identity is the perimeter, but it sounds like you're saying identity is still the perimeter because an author is still a human, right? So you're still saying identity is still the unit of governance. It's just that it's harder to figure out who that identity is. And we need to make sure maybe it's not the identity of the agent, but the identity of some other person, or who is behind the agent. But identity, it's still is still the perimeter.
Yeah, a couple of interesting points for you, Mike. The Identiverse this year, I didn't get to go in person. Did you get to go
Mhm.
this year, by the way?
I was there. Yeah.
You were there. Okay. Well, I did something remotely and a little bit nerdy. I every year I go and I download the agenda, and all the
Hmm.
speakers and all the content, and I've done that for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And so I did some textual analysis and
Hmm.
summary statistics on tracking keywords and trends. This blog post, by the way, is on my LinkedIn. If you go and look at past
Yeah. RSA does a
notes.
good job of that too, by the way. Did you get the idea from RSA?
I don't.
Um,
I just no. I didn't get it from anybody. Um, I think I started doing this to create a word cloud like 10 years ago for an identiverse, and I just continued doing it because I was fascinated with word clouds. And then I got into data science and statistics, and I was a little going from visuals to actual numbers. And then if you track the word intent over the last since 2022, 2024, and 26, intent showed up one time in 2022 as intentions. And then in 2026, there's a sudden increase in tracking intent. So I wrote the title of this post on my LinkedIn, if someone's looking for it, is called Intent is the New Perimeter. And that's what I believe. It's no longer about the identity. The data is important at rest, in use, etc. But I believe that intent is, and it's not just a belief that I share. Others who are working in this space also have an interest in tracking the intent of agents, and that means we're going not beyond identity, but deeper than the identity attributes of users and agents, and looking at actions and deterministic versus non-deterministic actions and outcomes. So I think that intent is a really fascinating topic that is represented in the docs and represented in the author protocol, because we want to look at drift awareness. How far are actions of subagents and adversarial swarms drifting from the original intent of the requester for a given use case or action. And then I see things like zero trust and decentralized identity on a decline in terms of interest. So when I looking at those trends, I do think that's one to watch. And then if you've, I was talking with a mutual friend, Eve Mahler, about this on April Fool's Day. She shared the website Replaced by Claude. Have you seen or played around with the Replaced by Claude?
No.
So it's a website. You can Google it and find it. It's still there. It wasn't just an April Fool's joke. You put your LinkedIn URL in there, and it will give you uh, um, a report card on whether or not your job is just lines of code, and whether you can be replaced by AI or not. And it gives you um, basically a retirement date based on how AI has replaced your skills.
I already have. You're actually talking to my agent. I'm actually like at the pool swimming right now.
I love that. I love that. That, maybe what most of us end up doing is spending time by the pool or wherever we go. But Replaced by Claude was it inspired and made an appearance in that same article about what the CISO was asking me after RSA. And if your executive is just one click away from their mind and thoughts and their voice being cloned and then put into an adversarial agent swarm, that represents a new threat model that we need to be thinking about. Because I do the paint by numbers in the docs on this for the author protocol, but you can pass all of the do you have the right tokens, do you have the right access permissions, and still have a negative outcome for a use case. So that's my goal or my intent, to get a little more granular and specific in terms of what behaviors we're watching and how agents and sub-agents act in any given use case.
I'm a bit of a skeptic on the whole idea of intent-based governance, because governance starts with enumeration. And how do we enumerate intent? I understand how to enumerate the humans. I go to the HR department and I found out all the workers, my workforce, and I find out all my B2B partners. And maybe, so I have a sort of a strategy for inventorying all of my humans. Even as, if you might say this is a fool's errand, I could maybe inventory my agents, even though there are ephemeral agents and sub-agents and it doesn't seem possible or productive. There are lots of companies out there that are saying, yeah, let's inventory all the agents. But intent seems like a very atmospheric type of thing. How would I actually describe an intent? Is that intent actually in human language, natural language, or is there some more accurate way that I could do it, so that I could identify an intent? Do I assign every intent an intent ID and inventory those things? I just don't understand how the logistics of this intent-based governance would actually work. And if you can't enumerate intent, isn't intent really just a claim that comes along with maybe a request for authorization? Like, here's my technical description of what I want, and here's some extra stuff in human language, natural language, which you might want to know about or consider in making a decision now or down the line.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great questions, Mike. And I think by way of a short preview of what's to come and a little announcement, this just I made this yesterday, and then it's we're sharing this online as well. But author as the protocol, there's a project right now called NeuroNest. It's an agentic IDE. It's a project for an IDE that allows developers to kind of like the AWS Kiro Developers can go and in an agentic IDE and write code and have access to over 100 different agents to write code and to do tasks. And as of this month, as of right now, Author protocol is being implemented inside of this NeuroNest IDE, and the to get that allows you to track intent and drift, and to get a notification of variance from how far off intent is. It's there's a concept in the spec that's called monotonic narrowing of scope, similar to maybe scopes in OAuth, but it basically like a guardian agent, or checking activity for every single hop, whether sub agents that assign themselves tasks are doing things aligned with policy or not. When you're working in in an environment where you have sub agents that reason and are non-deterministic, they can spin up worker agents to do tasks that are, like you said, ephemeral. You don't have an inventory of them before they're created. Then they go out and do tasks, and then they don't exist anymore. They vanish without a trace. So there's an important concept in Microsoft and other vendors have clued into this, called decision traces. So even within the Azure agent builder, you can, when you start loading data and you run queries against the Azure interface, they're what's called decision traces, and these become an important part of governance of agent activity. And these become evidence as to why a decision was made and under what context. So it's not dissimilar to that, right? These do have IDs. They do become a part of a log, and they become auditable. And in Microsoft case and in other vendors, become very valuable from an observability and a security and a compliance perspective.
When I think about accountability, so the real challenge here is governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we have a security architecture and we can't figure at a high level how we're going to make that architecture reduce our risk, then what good is it really? So I think I sort of buy into the idea that we need to know and have a plan for how to govern the agents, right? And then we can tell agent developers what they need to do in order to be governed properly. And when I think of governance, I think that we have sort of two challenges. One is risk management, and one is accountability. And you could also say transparency or observability is needed, so governors can know that things aren't drifting or going in the wrong direction. But when we talk about the author, one challenge or one reason that I'm a little skeptical of this idea is that when we need accountability, when things go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't just need to know the author. We actually need to know all the humans, all the agents, all the pieces of software, all of the business units, and all of the third parties that were available. So elevating one particular human in this doesn't really seem all that useful, because it's the total. When the shit hits the fan, we got to make some phone calls, and we got to call all those dudes.
Yeah.
So I don't see why elevating this one particular identity, the author, is really that revolutionary.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Mike. When I created this, I gave the chances of success of this, proposal, single-digit chances of succeeding. But what I reasoned as to why I should do it anyways was There are some other projects out there that seem to be doing similar things, but none of the companies and none of these individuals are inviting me to collaborate on their project. But as I mentioned when I introduced myself, I've been working in this industry for a good amount of time, since 2000, and I've been around a lot of enterprise implementations as an architect, as an integrator, as a developer, as a security engineer, as a entrepreneur. I've seen a lot of things, and it's not something that I felt comfortable with just rubbernecking or being a spectator. I had to roll up my sleeves and actually, whenever I would go on LinkedIn, the majority of posts I see and read about are people describing this problem. And like 9 out of 10 um, posts that I would read are, just continuing describing, repeating the same problem over and over again. I'm like, I'm not joining that conversation. I'm not here, to become a part of the problem, whether I'm on my own or in a team. I'm going to be a part of the solution. And so I drafted this to get instead of writing a blog post about it, I took it long form and thought as a solution, what would I want to see? And I put more emphasis and preference on the drift detection and drift awareness aspect of this, because that's the failure mode that I predict is going to be most problematic. So I'm with you there on the skepticism, Mike. And, although within less than 2 months, a project picked it up and integrated the protocol inside of an IDE you saw the SpaceX acquisition of Cursor for $60 billion. And these agentic IDEs are going to be pretty significant in the grand scheme of things. So I would also add that the I don't disagree with you that it needs to connect to the greater taxonomy within the organization and like the organizational graph. I can't solve that. There's actually a lot of good solutions out there for that already. But within this agentic, especially to your point in your question earlier about what's the difference between the agents, the sub agents, and the worker agents and the digital twins, there needs to be some better rules and policies that govern how those are instantiated and how they can be protected from causing harm to the organization.
Yeah. So I've also been witnessing this deluge of content and every day I seem to try and like comment on or help, clarify for people, one thing, but it is sort of a bucket, a drop in the ocean for how much you can actually refute. Um, what I notice is that people constantly conflate governance with authorization. So they
Yeah.
say, I need governance. I want to make sure that when I do this wire transfer, that we can send this extra command, like the example from your article. That's
Yeah.
authorization. That's not governance. Um, and so, but I feel like the biggest mistake I see people making is that they constantly conflate authorization and governance, which are two different things performed by two different parties. Developers are in charge of authorization. The governors are involved in managing risk and holding people accountable. And so those two things are totally different things. Now, the CISO might be in charge of reviewing the policies submitted by developers, making sure that they align with the corporate schema so they can be analyzed and trying to see cross-application risk. Maybe you're not allowed to do something here, but allowed to do it here. And only somebody at the top level like will have that visibility. Um, and so, focusing in on the authorization, you pointed out that we need a hook here into the authorization engine. And so, what is your thought about the sort of the direction of travel for authorization engines? Because without sort of that infrastructure, you've thought of a new sort of architecture to stop bad stuff from happening. And so how does that translate into the author? How do you express these policies? What type of engines enforce them? And how do you see that? What's the direction of travel, at least for this in the
Yeah,
authorization space
yeah.
that you
Good.
see?
I'm not a developer, to be quite frank and honest with you. I work with developers, and so I can't speak, as someone who has, developed, I mean, I do write code, but I don't, I'm not a developer with a capital D. That's not my career.
Mm,
I love working with them though, and I've only been able to do what I've done with author by working with developers. But as an architect and as an entrepreneur, what I see as in my threat model, Mike, to come back to that, is the vulnerabilities now exist in the um, at the cognitive layer, in the way that social engineering works with humans, social engineering through prompt poisoning or LLM tampering can cause good agents to turn bad. And the legacy authorization tools wouldn't be able to see or touch that. You've probably no doubt familiar with the zero click Microsoft exploit of Copilot. From there were two of them, and that is still a unmitigated risk in a lot of different environments where attachments that come into your inbox, and then you have an agent that goes in and reads the attachments because you have a rule or a task or a workflow that says that does that, and then you're unpatched. Your agents are going to potentially receive um, instructions to go out and do bad things or surveil or perform unauthorized tasks in your environment. So, to authorization engines, I would, suggest that everything's going to evolve to become more agent aware and agentic. And it's great that everyone's going to open up and address that. But I think the big elephant in the room to me is that the biggest vulnerability in this agentic world is the cognitive layer, which neither authentication or authorization in its current form addresses. And I see that the author is a layer above authentication and authorization that works at a semantic layer that's not binary, right? Whereas authorization and authentication are binary.
hmm. I don't think I quite follow you there, but actually, let's pivot a little bit. Um, and so, okay, so I'm not sure. I feel like saying, this bad thing happened in this case because this insecure application consumed identity badly. Um, that's sort of par for the course. It doesn't mean that our authorization systems are bad. It just means that they don't prevent bad things from happening. Like used incorrectly, if you point the gun at your head and pull the trigger, you will die. It doesn't mean that the firearm is always going to be dangerous. So I just see that it's not that we don't have the tools, but maybe we're just not using them correctly. We don't have the type of policy enforcement and the type of we're not using the tools. Um, and you could say that there's more software in front of us than behind us. Um, Companies never get rid of anything, so all that legacy carries them around. But with that said, there's more of software in front of us, so we want to be able to provide guidance for the new software that's being written, so that the software instead of blaming the developers for writing insecure code, we could say to the developers, "This is what we want you to do, and this is how we're going to be able to better manage policies and better and enable accountability when things go wrong." Um,
Yeah.
so I guess
Yeah. I
it's not
don't,
really a question; it's more of a comment.
yeah, no, I totally get it, Mike. And to push back a little bit on a statement you said about the identities, in this use case, the identity checks out. It's no longer about asking the question, "Who are you?" The authorization checks out. It's no longer about asking the question, are you authorized to perform this task? It's, it's more about if developers are so great at doing these kinds of things, then you might, we've had all kinds of innovations in authorization. You could create a list of them for the last 15 years. And, it's, AI, those legacy vendors aren't really keeping up with this AI landscape because the paradigm has completely shifted. And I believe that, developers who are trying to write code to address business use cases are not experts in security or implementing secure. Even developers across the range or the spectrum cannot be relied on for writing secure code. So, we've hit upon a couple of notes in this talk about the need for governance. And what author is an attempt to do is to build governance in at runtime that extends authentication and authorization to the semantic layer in non-deterministic workflows at the beginning of 2026. I think a lot of us, as seen, would have predicted that within the cybersecurity world that this is the year of security at runtime, not just security architecture or security on paper, but security, and in this case, governance has to be embedded. Like in the case of Neuronest, we're embedding governance rules right within the IDE, so developers don't have to worry about that as much.
Right. I think helping developers in the IDE is a really good idea. And there's a number of agent from frameworks that are
Mhm.
looking to do that. For example, the Microsoft AGT, Agentic Governance Toolkit, um, and IDEs, any IDE could take one of those sort of governance toolkits and implement agents more securely.
Yeah.
I wonder, when you say, oh, well, the authorship is not clear or the intent is not clear, I wonder, there's been a lot of talk about making agents a first class entity. So we have humans, i.e., users, we have clients in OAuth, which is really a piece of software, either a mobile app or a website normally. And there's been a lot of talk about agents having specific metadata about it that needs to be captured, that we need
Yeah.
specific, let's say, identifiers, but also maybe through Spiffy or whatever, Spiffy like, mechanisms for generating identifiers.
Yeah.
Um, we need maybe ownership, maybe not only which human, but it might not matter that Steve Tout did it. What might matter is that, Acme Incorporated did it. So we not only need metadata about the humans, but we also need metadata about the organizations and trust that the organizational layer or what MCP, skills is this agent authorized for, or what is the intent in natural language. So it seems like we have all this metadata that needs to be captured about agents, and that what's really missing when what you're trying to point out from AuthR is that we need more information about this software. Clients, in the OAuth sense, doesn't capture the information that we need about these new entities. And agents have some unique things. And it sounds like what you're saying is we really need a new infrastructure for the registration or attestation of metadata about agents.
Yeah, so one very quick story. I was giving a talk last month at a data management summit up here in the Seattle area, and I won't name the name of the vendor, but it was one of the big hyperscalers who has an IDE, and they spoke right after me, giving a talk about their IDE, and because my talk was around the idea of the shift from artificial to verified intelligence, and talking about the replaced by Claude, the adversarial swarms, and etc. And so the question that was asked to this presenter who spoke after me about their IDE was, tell me, like, how is governance built in? How would you do data governance within this context? And there was no answer. It wasn't a half-assed answer. It wasn't like a cheap answer. There was an admission of not having a story whatsoever. And, you know, I still, even with the adoption of Author by Neuronest, I still give it about a single digit chance of succeeding. I'm not, being like overly confident here, and I don't think that it's, better than anything out there, but it is my humble attempt to fill a space that we're not talking enough about. And to your point, Mike, I think the registry is one component of it. And what makes me cringe is efforts to kind of just tack on additional attributes to the schema of existing protocols like OAuth, and make this work in existing infrastructure. A lot of big companies have vested interest in maintaining that status quo, right? So the space that I'm trying to fill are, extending authorization with intent, scope, provenance, drift, and revocation. So it's more than just the agent registry. It's about having the guardian agents tracking and monitoring at the cognitive layer that is simply void today.
Well, the pigeons are flying, so that's our signal that
Yes.
the 41 minutes has elapsed and you've survived your first episode. But before we break, anything else you want to summarize of things to look out for coming up?
I think I was just summarizing, about what I hoped that author is going to do in terms of filling the gap. At a very minimum, I'm hoping that this project and those who want to collaborate just help move the conversation forward, whether it ultimately becomes wildly successful or not. I do think this cognitive layer and the dangers of adversarial swarms and sub agents in this agentic world leaves a lot of more problems to be solved and to be worked on within the identity industry. And I invite collaborators. It's not a perfect protocol. It's at version 0.01, and it's open source. Mike, I know you're a fan of that. So it's really just an open conversation and an open innovation format that anybody can join. And I would encourage them to find me on LinkedIn, find the project on GitHub, check out the strategy layer blog, where the writings are about the project, and to share your experiences and your insights.
So, and actually, I'll make a quick reference to the episode notes if you want to find out about AuthR, the GitHub repo, Steve's articles. We have episode notes on every episode. So glue.co/IOH-203, it's always the episode number. So you can check out the notes. I'll also publish my takeaways there. I just want to take a quick moment to announce the next episode. We'll be talking about an OAuth draft, is a 0.0 draft from Curity, Judith Carrer, OAuth Client Challenge Protocol. So I thought this was an interesting idea. Curity's normally up to like good, interesting stuff. So I'm going to chat about it. The reason we do these live streams is so that we can shed light on some of these efforts. And I think, I admire your goal of trying to move things forward. I say to Rohit Kare, my co-collaborator on GovOps, we just want to push the rock up the Sisyphean hill a little bit. And I think collectively we're going to do that. And this stuff might not get figured out, till alphas are, in the prime of their work years. But we're going to push it forward a little bit in these early embryonic days. Okay, last note, remember, follow IOH on LinkedIn and YouTube, one follower at a time. We're getting to 3,000. And with that, Steve, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Mike. It's been great catching up with you. It's been a year or longer since I've chatted with you, and it's always great to hear from you.
And thanks, audience, and we'll see